What's going on, party people? Woo! 4 of you and the rest of you, welcome to church today. For those of you who are new, my name's Dave Atherton. I'm the lead pastor here at Aviator Church. Really grateful that you're here. A lot of you who are relatively new must be here because today after church, we have a new attender event, and there are literally 32 of you signed up to be there. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So this is also great for those of you who signed up for that, but like you hate like the high pressure social weird situations, like you can just hide, right? And just be a part of the crew. So congratulations to you. If you are new and you've not been to a new attender event and you would like to get to know your staff and maybe learn a little bit more about what we're doing here at Aviator, today you can sneak in. However, if you didn't register, you have to wait until everyone else gets food first to eat. Deal? Deal. All right, love it. How many of you got your Shema bracelets on? Anyone else? The Shema? Yeah. I actually had several people who sent me pictures this week of them going about their regular life wearing their Shema bracelet. I got one family who, I think I put it up on Facebook even, had one of those little signs where you could arrange the letters, and they did the Shema in the letters next to their door, so putting it on the doorpost, right? I had one family tell me today that not only did their kid wear the bracelet and wear it to school, but he didn't even wait until kids came to ask him about it. He ran up and was like, "Do you see this? Do you know what this means?" And like starts talking about the bracelet, which is so cool. I can tell you literally this week for me, I have been working through... Here's a truth about me that you may not know about me. I am wildly impatient, right? I see things that I want to happen, and then I want them to happen right stinking now, right? There's no need to wait. We can get it done right now. Let's go right now. Let's go. And then my wife, my favorite thing that my wife loves about me the most is how I will then obsess on those things all of the time, right? I can't turn my brain off from thinking about conversations that need to be had or things that need to be done or what I can be doing to make something happen in this time that I'm waiting. I do not like sitting around and waiting. And this week, it's been interesting because I've been studying Deuteronomy, and I've been trying to figure out how to start our message series on Deuteronomy. And during this week, I've been reading in Deuteronomy, and really Moses, we're going to break this down today, but Moses keeps coming back to simple decisions, life or death, right? What do you want to choose, right? Do you want to choose to trust God, or do you want to choose to not trust God? Here's the problem. When I live in my impatience, I tend to not trust God the way that I should. And so this week, as part of me has been like, let's go, I keep looking down at my bracelet and I keep thinking, okay, I need to trust God. I need to love God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might. I look at Deuteronomy 30 and I recognize that this idea of loving God is not just about, choosing to love God, but it's also choosing to trust God in His timing and in the way that He wants to do things. And so your pastor this week, being real transparent, has just been struggling through this idea of impatience and how to trust God while I want stuff to happen right now. But I will say God has been working on me, and I think this week has been really helpful to me in understanding what Moses in the book of Deuteronomy is trying to teach and what he is trying to explain to the Israelites. So this week we're going to start it in earnest. Last week we kind of jumped ahead because it was Mother's Day, and we know that we looked at the Shema and that we are challenged in the Shema to teach our children, to impress upon them the first and greatest commandment is what Moses said, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 5. And so we kind of jumped ahead to get a main theme of the book of Deuteronomy. Today we're going back to Deuteronomy chapter 1. And we're actually going to start from the very beginning. Now, there are 3 things that I think you need to understand if you want to really grasp what the book of Deuteronomy is about. There are 3 things. Number 1 is history. Everyone say history. There is a lot of history that happens before the book of Deuteronomy. In case you don't know, Deuteronomy is the 5th book of the Bible. It's in the Old Testament, which of course we call the Old Testament because it's... Proud of you. We're going to stay in the Old Testament a lot this year, actually. It's going to be a lot of fun. But we're going to be studying the 5th book of the Old Testament, Deuteronomy. And so we have 4 books of stuff that have happened up until now. And when you think about what the first book is, which is Genesis, a few things happened in Genesis, right? A couple of historically significant things take place in Genesis. And that's just the tip of the iceberg as we go through the Exodus account, through Leviticus, through Numbers, as we gear up to Deuteronomy. So there's a lot of history that I feel like you need to have a handle on before you can really unpack Deuteronomy. But here's the good news. Moses in the book of Deuteronomy spends about the first 4.5 chapters going through the history that he thinks you need to know in order to understand the book of Deuteronomy. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on the history today. The second thing that I think you need to know is the setting of Deuteronomy. Everyone say setting. Who wrote it? How was it written? Why was it written? For what was the setting around the situation of it being written? Today we are going to dive into that. And the third thing that I think you need to know actually exists in Deuteronomy, but it's something we're going to take a step out of Deuteronomy and look at a bigger picture of a thread through the Bible as we look at biblical covenants. Everyone say covenants. I think you need to understand biblical covenants if you really want to understand what Moses is trying to get at the heart of Deuteronomy. So we're going to be going through all of those things as we study this book, but today we're going to focus on the second and third, the latter two, I guess we'll call it. We're going to be focusing today on the setting of Deuteronomy, and we're going to be looking at biblical covenants, what they mean, what they are, and where the people understood themselves to be when the book of Deuteronomy was written. Because as we've talked about here before, we don't want to just read a passage in Deuteronomy and then go straight across and say, what does this mean for me today, right? That's bad preaching. It's bad Bible study. We want to study the passage in Deuteronomy. We want to first understand what it meant to them then. What was the context? How would they have understood it? What did it mean to them specifically? Then we're going to go across and see how it relates to the cross of Jesus Christ. And then from there, we're going to go down and try to take away what we can learn from it, how we can walk away from it with some application for our lives today. So, you guys ready and hyped to study the book of Deuteronomy? I appreciate fake enthusiasm. We're going to pray, and then we're going to dive in and start walking through this book together. By the way, if you're curious, like, how long are we going to be in Deuteronomy? I started trying to outline. I think I could do, and I'm not joking, I could do 8 weeks on chapter 1. So we probably won't, but I'm just telling you, we very easily could and just begin to scratch the surface of what's going on here. So a long time is the answer. We're going to be here for a long, long time. So let's pray. Father God, that as we open up your word today, as we study a book that, God, honestly, probably is often lost in churches today, that maybe is not studied enough. God, we ask that you take this old text, this text that was written to make very clear choices available to the people, and that, God, we would be able to see those same choices exist for us today. That, God, we wouldn't try to skip or get around the hard parts of the book, but that, God, we would wrestle with what your word says in its entirety. God, we know that you named Israel, which means struggles with God or wrestles with God. God, I ask that you give us the courage to wrestle through this book. That, God, you give us the courage to deal with hard things, with difficult decisions that need to be made, and that ultimately, God, you would draw us closer to you as we study your word. We love you, and in your name we pray. And everyone said, all right, so Deuteronomy is called Deuteronomy, or the second law. Now you're saying, why is it called the second law? Here's the breakdown for you. Deuter, think duet, think dual, right? The root in the Greek for two, so that is second. And then onomy comes from the word nomos, which is law. So the second law. Now, I said that was in the Greek, which if you are a Bible scholar, you would know. The book of Deuteronomy was written in Hebrew. So Deuteronomy is not the actual original name for the book. The original name for the book in the Hebrew was, I think it was called Devalim, which is it's the word for these are the words. And that's the reason that they named it that. It's because the first words of the book are, these are the words that God gave to Moses. And so, in the Greek version of this, they translated the Hebrew Bible into something called the Septuagint. When they named the book in the Septuagint, they named it Deuteronomy. That's what stuck for us. And it's the second law. What does that mean? Here you go. A little bit of history. Again, we will dive way deeper into history moving forward. But in the book of Exodus, after the Exodus, right, after the Israelites escaped from Egypt, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, they go out and God gives them the law. Part of the law was the Ten Commandments. All throughout the book of Exodus, you're going to see all kinds of laws that exist. As we study the book of Deuteronomy, we're going to talk about the law. We're going to talk about how the law is broken down into basically three components, which is civil law, ceremonial law, and moral law. We're going to dive into into all of this fun stuff. But what you need to know is that Moses went to a place called Mount Sinai, and he was given the law, the first law, the actual law as given by God for how Israel was to conduct itself, how it was to be a nation, how it was to live morally. And then he came down, and he saw the people were doing dumb stuff, which they are wont to do, and we'll talk more about what the dumb stuff was next week. But essentially, he got really mad, broke the tablets. There was a whole thing. We end up getting another set of tablets. That is the first law. And then a bunch of stuff happens, which we're going to dive into. And then Moses sits down and he has to walk through with the people again the law. So Deuteronomy is after the original experience with getting the Ten Commandments and all this stuff is done. He now is sitting down to remind the people what the law says. So a lot of Deuteronomy is kind of highlights that you'll find through Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, right? And so this is him sitting and kind of talking to the people and trying to give them the important things, the highlights of the law that they need to understand. So today what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to start understanding Deuteronomy by studying only 5 verses. I came really close to using every single verse in Deuteronomy 1 and Deuteronomy 30 today. And I literally started preaching it and trying to time it. It would have taken me like 2.5 hours. So real quick, I can go back to that version. How many of you guys have time today? That's not enough. Okay, we'll do the first 5 verses. We're going to do the first 5 verses because the first 5 verses will help us to understand the setting and will set us up to understand the biblical covenants. Again, understanding that we will not give enough time today to all of the history that needs to be covered. I promise you we're going to dive into that into the weeks as we go. So we're going to start in verse 1. It says this: these are the words. Remember, these are the words, which is the Hebrew title of the book. These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness. Everyone, I want you to pay close attention to these words. Beyond the Jordan, okay? We're going to come back to that, and that is going to be super important for you to understand the context and the setting of this book. So these are the words that he spoke to all of Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness, in the Arabah, opposite Suph, I think is how you say it. I'll be honest with you, I don't really know. There's a lot of words here that we just, whatever, don't say so much. So does Suph sound good to you guys? All right. Opposite Suph. Between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. Anyways, moving on. It is 11 days journey. Everyone say 11 days. It is 11 days journey from Horeb. When you see this word Horeb, just understand that is used interchangeably with Mount Sinai. So Horeb is Mount Sinai, which will be important as we study the book. It's 11 days journey from Horeb or Sinai by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses spoke to the people of Israel according to all that the Lord had given him in commandment to them, after he had defeated Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth, and in Edrei. Beyond the Jordan, again, beyond the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to explain the law, saying, how many of you are like, this is exciting passage of scripture so far? Like, edge of your seat for getting to breathe, right? Like, this could be like the basis for a Marvel movie. It's powerful, exciting, gripping stuff. And here's the thing. As you're reading that, it's like, oh, this is a lot of information and detail that I don't think I probably need to understand. And yet, in here, if you're not paying attention, you'll miss a couple of huge things that you need to understand. And so we're going to actually, right here, jump in to say, you have to understand or recognize the setting to understand Deuteronomy. We're going to go back and look at the first couple of verses. Listen again. These are the words that Moses spoke to all of Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness. And then skipping down to verse 2. It is 11 days journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses spoke to the people of Israel. Now, if you don't understand what's happening there, here's what you're missing. That's one of the funniest verses in the Bible. And you weren't laughing, so I'm guessing you don't get the joke, right? Because I read it, and I didn't hear laughter, so I think that it just went right over your head, much like most things on Twitter with most people, right? We're going to dive in, and we're going to have to do a little bit of the history. So I'm going to show you guys, we're going old school. We're going Bible maps. Who's excited for Bible maps today? Now, if you look up at my screen, if this works, and I think it should, I found out that I can actually do this and turn on a laser pointer and go like that. Look at that. Woo! See my little red, it froze. Okay, we're good. So I'm going to use my little red line to try to illustrate a couple things for you so that you can go back and understand how hilarious verse 2 is, okay? So what you're looking at over here, this area here, is Egypt. I'm actually going to point for just a second. This guy here is a long river in Egypt. Any guesses as to what river that is? I'm so proud of you, right? The Nile River comes up and then opens into the Nile River Delta. I know this stuff because I taught my kids' homeschool class this year, and we did all of this in our geography. So anyways, so this is the Nile River Delta, and essentially, if you know the story of the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, and eventually God raised up Moses and said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and tell him to... let my people go, right? And we've talked about this before, but I feel like we should probably dive into it again. The very spiritual song, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, oh, baby, let my people go. Huh? Yeah, right? That's how the Bible works. So anyways, Moses at that point starts leading the Israelites, and one of two things happened when they left. So you guys see down here, there's this body of water and this body of water. What you don't see is that the Red Sea is actually kind of down here, and it's got these two little like snail or slug-like antennae that stick up. And so one of the possibilities is the Israelites left. You guys see my little thing here? They crossed the Red Sea about here, and then they traveled down here to a place called Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is the mountain where they ended up being for about a year. It took a couple months to get there. And so this was the place after the Egyptians charge in, after the Israelites, the water crashes in, whatever. They go to this place called Mount Sinai. God descends on Mount Sinai, and then Moses is able to talk to God on Mount Sinai. And during that time, he's given the Ten Commandments. He's given the entirety of the law. Moses begins to become essentially really the first like major prophet for the people in this time. And so it's possible that this is Mount Sinai right here. As a matter of fact, there is a mountain there today called Jebel Musa, which is the Moses mountain, basically, or the mountain of Moses. There are also people who believe that they left Egypt, they came down here, walked across to this other Gulf of Aqaba, and crossed over here, and the Mount Sinai is actually somewhere down here. The important thing is this: we don't know where Mount Sinai exactly is. There's a bunch of people who think it's in one spot. There's a bunch of people who think it's in another spot. For our purposes, it does not matter. What we need to understand is that God descended upon Mount Sinai, and during that time, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, he entered into a covenant with Moses, and through Moses, thereby with the entire Israelite people. Now, from there, God had given a promise to the people that they would take some land. Does anybody know the name of that land? Good, right? He made a promise about some land called the Promised Land. And so, let's go back real quick. In chapter 2, it says, it is 11 days' journey from Horeb, which is also known as Mount Sinai, by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. So, let's say that Mount Sinai is this one right here. It is called the Sinai Peninsula, for what it's worth. So let's assume that this is where it is. It is about an 11-day move to get from this place here up here to Kadesh Barnea. Now, the Promised Land where they're going is right up here, okay? So it takes 11 days to get from here to here. 11 days. Everyone say 11 days. 11 days. God took the Israelites and he took them to Mount Sinai, and he spent time giving them rules and laws for how to organize. We're going to talk about this next week, how to help establish their government for the new country that they were going to be establishing, right? And when all of that was done, and when the people were ready, God says, let's ride. We out. Let's go. Go into the Promised Land. It was 11 days to Kadesh Barnea. 11 days. From the time that they left Mount Sinai, 11 days from the time that they left Mount Sinai to get to Kadesh Barnea, to get ready to enter into the Promised Land. 11 days. Thank you. At 11 days, they are here in Kadesh Barnea, and God says, now, Go take that promised land. It's going to be dope. You're going to love it, right? It's going to be awesome. It's going to change your world. It's going to be a great place for you for generations and generations. I'm so glad we're in a covenant. You guys will always obey me, and that will never change. What an amazing thing. I'm glad that you love me and trust me and will always do what I ask you to. Do you guys sense that I'm trying to lay it on real good and thick here? At Kadesh Barnea, and we'll dive into more of the history on this later, they decided the people that they needed to check out the land before they went up there. They sent some spies up into Israel, or into the land of Canaan, and the spies came back down like, you're not going to believe how big these grapes are. They walked up, and that was the report coming down. These grapes, they have clusters of grapes. No joke. Takes 2 grown men to carry the grapes. The grapes are so big. The grapes are enormous. And everyone's like, sounds good. Let's go. I love huge grapes. Who doesn't love huge grapes? I'm so thrown off guard. Lacey just raised her hand. This girl eats nothing but vegetables, and she hates grapes, apparently. I can't even wrap my brain around this. Anyways. She makes fun of me for eating pizza. I make fun of her for eating rabbit food. And then she doesn't like grapes. I am utterly flummoxed right now. Anyways, literally the people, these grapes are so good they come down. Everyone's like, yeah, the grapes are great. But then the other 10 spies says, but here's the problem. As big as the grapes are, the people are way bigger. They're terrifying. There's no way we could take them. There is no possible way listen. There is no possible way that we, the people of the one true God, on whose behalf God just wiped out the biggest, baddest army in the entire world, there is no conceivable way that we could go in and win a battle against these people. There's no way that we could walk in and win this battle. First off, duh, correct. Have you not been paying attention? Obviously, you can't win the battle. But obviously, God can't lose it, right? Like, what a dumb thing you're saying. You just watched him wipe out the Egyptian army, and you just watched him do all this incredible stuff at Mount Sinai, literally a pillar of fire as God's presence is giving you instruction. And he's saying to go to what land again? The promised land. Why is it that I seem outraged and incensed and none of you do? It's the promised land. It's not the maybe you can take it if you can beat the big guys land. It's not the good luck fighting the giants so you can eat big grapes land. It's the promised land. The God who is all powerful says, I, the God who can wipe out anybody by going like this, am promising to give to you this land. And they get there and like, you people are too big. 11 days. 11 days from here in the very presence of God, receiving God's incredible law and watching God do incredible things. 11 days to here where all of a sudden they forget how big their God is. Where all of a sudden they look at the people and the obstacles and they say, God's not big enough for this. 11 days. So, what should have happened next was they should have gone from here right up into here, taken the promised land and lived there for generations and been happy and blessed. Instead, they did this. After this, God gets upset and says, hey, now you're going to wander in the wilderness. You may have heard of this. We'll talk about it more next week. But you're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and every single one of you dummies is going to die. Every last one of you. Your kids get to go into the promised land. You don't, because you don't trust me, because for some reason I don't understand. Your brain can't remember 12 days ago. So instead of going from here to here, they did one of these routes. Kind of looked like this for a while, right? They did a little bit of this, and then over here, and then around here, and whatever. Now, let's go back to verse 1. Where are they? These are the words that Moses spoke to Israel beyond the Jordan. Let's go back to our map. What they should have done was go from Kadesh Barnea straight up here. This is how God told them to go. Now, let's real quick recap one other thing. After the 11-day journey to get to Kadesh Barnea, where are we at now? In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month. You guys see it now? Is it kind of funny? It was an 11-day trip that has now taken 14,901 days. It was an 11-day trip that 40 years and an entire generation of people had to die for. An 11-day trip because the people lost sight of who God is and what God does and what God is all about. An 11-day trip turned into a 40-year-long wilderness wandering. And now, instead of being here, going here after 11 days, after 40 years, they have meandered way up here. And this is the Jordan River. And they're right outside the Jordan River. And now they have the opportunity to do what their idiot parents should have done. Some people don't like when I say things like that. But let's be real clear about this. They were idiots, right? They were unintelligent. They were untrusting, kind of like us. Nobody laughed or said anything there. Let's take a look at Scripture. Scripture tells us that the people had seen what God had done. And then they looked at their surrounding circumstances and they got scared and they turned their eyes away from God and they stopped trusting God to do the things He had called them to do. Boy, it's a good thing we don't do that anymore, right? Does anybody think that maybe Deuteronomy will be a useful book for us to study today, right? It's a really good thing that we can actually look at what God's word has to say about God's people, because when you put it in the proper context, we are no different than the Israelites. We are no different than the Israelites in our ability to take our eyes off of what God has called us to do. It's why Moses said, hey, take this Shema and do what with it? Literally tattoo it between the eyes on your face, right? I want you to put it on your wrist. I want you to put it on the doorpost. I want you to put it everywhere that you conceivably might ever look or where somebody might look at you. Why? Because we forget how big God is all of the dadgum time. And He's saying, listen, your parents, your grandparents, they forgot what God had done for them. And they languished in a 40-year wilderness and they all died and they're buried out there. You now have an opportunity to revisit the decision that they made. What are you going to do with it? The setting, when we talk about the setting of Deuteronomy, I think you need to understand this. Everyone died. Moses is now about 120 years old. You have Joshua and Caleb, who are somewhere between 60 and 80. And then everyone else is 39 or younger. You have one guy who's 120 talking to a bunch of people who are 39 and under and saying, listen to me, younger generation, learn from our experiences and make better choices. Parents, how does that go for you? I can tell you this, every time that I talk to my boys and I say, hey, I've made mistakes, listen to me, I'll give you wisdom. I know they always listen and obey. They look at me and they say, yes, Father, you are wise. And they do whatever I tell them to because they recognize my incredible wisdom. Moses is doing the most frustrating thing in the entire world right now. As the only 100-plus-year-old person, he's trying to talk to a bunch of know-it-alls and explain to them, listen, you have to make better choices than we did. You have to make better choices than your ancestors did, or you will languish and you will die. You know the difference between knowledge and wisdom? I've shared this here before, but it's been a while. The difference between knowledge and wisdom, I heard this one time and it blew my mind. My understanding of knowledge and wisdom changed completely. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. Moses is not here trying to give them knowledge. He's not trying to give them information. He's trying to give them wisdom that comes from 120 years of experiencing God one-on-one, that comes from 120 years of watching God do incredibly impossible things. And now He's not trying to give them knowledge. They know the stories. He's trying to give them wisdom. Make wise decisions. And the wisest decision, Israel, that you can make is to follow God. The wisest decision that you can make is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your might, with all your strength. The wisest decision that you can make is to take that and tattoo it on your wrist and your forehead and your doorpost and your gates and everywhere you look, so that you'll always be reminded that no matter how big the issues are that you're facing, your God is bigger and is capable of handling them. Now, that's the setting. Poor old Moses talking to a bunch of young know-it-alls, trying to explain to them how to be wise. Second thing is you have to have a basic understanding of biblical covenants. Now for this, we're going to jump all around the Bible, okay? I don't usually like jumping all around the Bible because I like having context, but what you need to understand, the context is, these are all covenants as prescribed by God to either individuals or to all humanity, and really even the individual ones extend to all humanity. We'll get to that in a second. A biblical covenant is where God enters into essentially a contractual agreement with us, with humanity, right? With individuals or with all of humanity writ large. It's a little bit different than the promise that he gives, or different than a promise, but functionally it works really similarly. It's where God says, I will do this, you will do this, and as long as we meet the stipulations of the covenant, then everything is going to work great, right? Some of them have no stipulations on us. Some of them God just gives us, and some of them there is an expectation on how we are to behave. I want you to understand that what's happened since they went to Mount Sinai, essentially they are now under what's called the Mosaic Covenant, which we'll get to in just a second. But there were two covenants, major ones before it, and there's two major ones that I'm going to address that come after it, so that you can see where the Mosaic Covenant falls in, so that you can understand the mindset of the people as we study the book of Deuteronomy. Here we go. We're going to start with biblical covenants, the Noahic Covenant. Obviously, this one has to do with who? Noah, right? The Noahic covenant comes in Genesis chapter 8, verse 20 through chapter 9, verse 17. And the basic outline here is that God is not going to destroy us anymore, and the sign is the rainbow. All of the covenants have a sign. So I'm going to pick up, I want to read it to you real quick so that you can hear. Excuse me. Starting in verse 20 of chapter 8, it says this. Then Noah built, this is after the ark settles down on Mount Ararat. Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seedtime and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. I'm going to skip ahead to verse 8 of chapter 9. It says, then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, behold, I will establish my covenant with you and your offspring, after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth that is with you, as many as came out of the ark, for it is every beast of the earth. I will establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you, that every living creature that is with you for the future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of my covenant between me and the earth. Now, you've probably heard about that before, right? The rainbow was the sign of God's covenant. Can I tell you something I didn't know until I was probably 30? I didn't understand what the rainbow meant. The rainbow was, right? The idea of the rainbow, when I hear bow, I think, oh, a pretty bow. It's a colorful ribbon, right? I looked at the rainbow as if it was a colorful ribbon. That's not what it represented at all. The idea here was this, that from the heavens, God literally wiped out virtually all of his creation, right? Like all people but one family, all the animals except for those who were on the ark. He literally, from the heavens, he waged war against humanity. And so the idea here is that he takes his bow, which is not a pretty bow in the sky. It is a bow as in bow and arrow. And he takes it and he points it down at the earth and he pulls back the string and he unleashes a war that we could not have possibly won. And so what does he say is the sign of the covenant, that he will no longer ever do that again? You know how they used to take care of their bows after a battle or after a hunt? They would come home and they would unstring the bow so that it would release the tension on the bow. And then they would take it and they would have a hook on the wall and they would hang the bow so that it was upside down like this. And that was essentially a sign that that bow is not ready for battle. The idea of the rainbow is God hanging his bow in the sky saying, I will not destroy you again. Can we get an amen on that one? Amen. Because here's the thing. What he says is not, you will never deserve to be destroyed again. He doesn't say that. What he says is, I recognize the wickedness of your heart from your youth, but I will never again destroy you. It's, you deserve to be destroyed, but I'm going to preserve life as a part of this covenant. And that was given to us free of charge. We didn't even have to do anything. Everyone go, yeah! I like that God doesn't wipe us out. That's a good one. Number 2, the Abrahamic covenant, which comes from There you go. The Abrahamic covenant in Genesis chapter 12 through 17. Basically, the covenant is that God is going to bless Abraham with a big, huge family, lots of land, and blessing all of the nations. The sign is of circumcision. I will really quickly hit that part there. Oh, no, I'm really doing that. You start laughing. That's what we're going to read right now. Chapter 17 says this. When Abram before he was Abraham, when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said to him, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, behold, my covenant is with you. You shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but you shall be called Abraham, for I have made you a father of a multitude of nations. Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham, and I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord, right arm, Father Abraham. Right, you remember that? Anyways, that's my chicken wing while I'm holding the Bible. We're going to skip ahead to verse 9 through 11. God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout all the generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you must be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Because there are children here, we will not dive into the intricacies of this passage. But what I will say is this. The circumcision is an important part of the covenant because what it does is it uniquely identifies God's people from everybody else. Right? And so in this passage, what is it going to be? That through Abraham, every nation on earth will ultimately be blessed. And we all say, yay! Because we're a nation on earth, right? Isn't that neat? Good. And all we have to do is nothing. Abraham has to be blameless. Sucks for him. Right? But all we have to do is just receive the blessing. Neat. Cool. Aren't covenants great? Do you feel like I'm setting you up for something? Is that why you're not coming with me on this? Because I am. Let's talk about the Mosaic Covenant now. Starting in Exodus 19 through 24 and chapter 31, Mosaic Covenant, it doesn't work as well, but because it has to do with Moses, very good. God will make Israel set apart so long as they are faithful. Hold on. God will set Israel apart so long as they are faithful. Can I just say real quick off the top? I don't like this one as much. This one I don't like. The other ones where it's just like, here's some free stuff, right? Who doesn't love free stuff? You walk into like a conference and you get a swag bag, like, oh, cool, free stuff. I love free stuff. This sounds like I'm going to have to do something, doesn't it? Sounds like Israel's going to have to actually own up to part of the covenant on this one. So long as they are faithful. The sign is the law and the Sabbath. Let's real quick jump into it. Moses, we're going to be in verse 12 through 18 here. This is after he has given the Ten Commandments. Said the Lord appeared to Moses, the Lord said to Moses, you are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbath. For this is a sign between you and me throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Well, that seems like a pretty steep price to pay for violating God's law. Isn't that weird that you die if you violate God's law? Good thing it doesn't say that anywhere else in the Bible. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ. Anyways. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among the people. 6 days shall work be done, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath is a solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath again shall be put to death, in case you missed it before. Therefore, the people of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as a covenant forever. It is a sign forever between me and the people of Israel, that in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And he gave to Moses, who had finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written on by the finger of God. I'm going to skip this one because I don't like it. Can we come back to the Mosaic Covenant later? Let's go back to the next one. We're going to fly through this. The Davidic Covenant is the Davidic Covenant because it's with... Very good. The Davidic Covenant basically says that through David, God will establish an eternal king for all the nations. Yay! That's a good one too, right? Let's get back on these positive ones. These I feel like there's too much negativity in the world. Let's talk about how good God is and tells us all the nice things we want to hear. Now therefore, this is in 2 Samuel chapter 7, starting in verse 8. Now therefore, thus you shall say to my servant David, thus says the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture following over the sheep, that you might be prince over the people of Israel. And I have been with you wherever you went, and I have cut off all your enemies from before you, and I will make you a great name like the name of the great ones of the earth. And I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them so that they may dwell in their own place, and shall be disturbed no more. And violent men shall afflict them no longer, as formerly was done. From the time that I appointed judges over my people, I will give you rest from your enemies. Moreover, the Lord declares to you that the Lord will make you a house when your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, meaning David, when you die. I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. And when he commits iniquity, I will discipline him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men. But my steadfast love will not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure before me. Your throne shall be established forever. In accordance with all these words, and in accordance with all his vision, Nathan spoke to David. There will be somebody who comes from your line, David, and he will establish a kingdom that will never, ever end. He will be the one to bring peace to the nation of Israel. And that's pretty dope, except the problem is we're not with the nation of Israel, but still it's pretty good. We see this once the fulfillment of the sign of this is on Christmas, when Jesus is born. The new covenant, Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 31 through 34, and I promise this will all make sense in just a second. This one says that God will restore and forgive his people, and the sign is the Last Supper. Let me read this to you. So the new covenant is the one that makes this matter to us. You ready? In Jeremiah chapter 31, starting in verse 31, it says, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant that they broke, though I was their faithful husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. And no longer shall each teach his neighbor, no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, know the Lord, for they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. The new covenant that extends to all of the nations, as we see in the book of Psalms. The new covenant that extends to all people, as we see in the teaching of Jesus. The new covenant extends to all of us for all of eternity. And it's off of this king. And so in the new covenant, the Last Supper, Jesus himself identifies it here. Sorry, I keep jumping around, and I know you might be bored. I hope you're not, because we're reading God's word, and it's pretty dope. In Matthew chapter 26, it says this. This is Jesus eating the Last Supper with the people, with his disciples. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took the bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to the disciples, and he said, take and eat, for this is my body. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant. For this is the blood of the new covenant. The sign of the new covenant is the blood of Jesus Christ that was to be shed for all of us. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Now, let's take a second again and look at it. Good, good, terrible, good, good. Right? When we look at the covenants, that's how we want to break it down. Good. God preserves life, will never wipe us out. He's hung his bow in the sky. We're at peace with God. Dope. Love it. Abraham, God promises blessing, that there will be many generations and many nations that come from Abraham. He will have countless sons, and we are one of them, and so are you, and all of that. And that through him, all the people will be blessed. Remember, through him means we're tracing the lineage all the way through, all the way to Jesus. So again, good. God is not only going to preserve our life, but he's going to bless all people through this one guy, Abraham. We didn't even have to do anything. Dope. Love it. David, an eternal king, is going to come, and he will establish a kingdom that will last forever. And the people who are a part of this kingdom will no longer be harassed by all of the evil and the terrible people. Like, this is an amazing fact. Good. Love it. Dope. God, good work. Like that one. The new covenant, this new king will fulfill the law through grace, that ultimately forgiveness will finally be enshrined, and the law of God can be written on our heart, that we can have a new mind and a new spirit. The Holy Spirit will enter into us. It will change us into a new creation. What an amazingly good thing that is. The only place where God messed up is with Moses. It's the only one. Listen to it again. God establishes the law that we have to live by. And if we don't live by it, we die. Bad. Don't like it. The important thing that you need to understand is this is where the people are. This is where the people who are getting the words from Moses are. This is what Moses is saying to the people. He's saying, listen, God, yes, he loves you. And yes, we are the circumcised people of Abraham's covenant. We are the ones who God has chosen. And yet, God has expectations on the way that we live and the way that we conduct our business. I will say it again. And yet, God has expectations on the way that we live and on the way that we conduct our business. And if we choose to step outside of God's will, there will be consequences for doing that. And the people say, boo. We don't like that God. That God's not so nice and loving as the God of all the other covenants. What they don't understand is that this is a necessary part for understanding the rest of the covenants. The covenants tell the story of the gospel because what we see is this. God is about preserving life. God has promised blessings for all the nation. God has promised an eternal king who can overcome your sin. God has promised grace and forgiveness for the sins that you have committed. And yet we are still held accountable for the decisions that we make. We still own our own decisions and our own choices. And so if you choose to live in a way that is outside of what God has called you to be in, the way that God has called you to live, then you will die. You will spend eternity in hell. You will do not pass go. Do not collect $200. That's it. That's done. Over. Eternity separated from God. If you spend your life choosing not God, then you cannot be shocked when in eternity God says, here you go, here's not God. It's a hard lesson to hear, but you need to understand all of the good parts of the covenant mean nothing if you don't understand the depravity of man. The forgiveness means nothing if you don't understand you need to be forgiven for something. The wages of your sin is death. That has been consistent from the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve sinned and God all of a sudden got them some nice fur coats to wear. Right? Isn't that nice that fur was just laying around on the ground? Where did the fur come from? Blood was spilled because of Adam and Eve's sin. From the very, very beginning, death was the result of sin. And this is what Moses is trying to say. He's saying your ancestors had the opportunity to go and to follow God and to be faithful to him, and they chose not to, and they died for it. What are you going to do? I want to close by reading one more passage. You're like, Dave, you've been all over the Bible. We're back in Deuteronomy. Chapter 30. This is my favorite. We're going to talk about this passage all the way through the book of Deuteronomy. For this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you. I'm going to say that one again in case somebody's saying, well, this is not fair. For this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you. Neither is it far off. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will ascend to heaven for us and bring it to us that we may hear it and do it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and it is in your heart so that you can do it. See, I have set before you today life and good or death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today by loving the Lord your God and by walking in his ways and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you and bless the land that you are entering to take possession of. But if your heart turns away And if you will not hear but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today, you will surely perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life. Did you guys hear how simple that is? Therefore, choose life. Therefore, choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God and obeying his voice and holding fast to him, for he is your life and the length of your days, that you may dwell on the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to them. Here's the good news about the Bible. We look at it and we say, wow, this is really difficult because like sin, we can't stop sinning and we're born sinful and all this stuff. Here's the cool thing about that. God has already shown you the path out of your sin. It's Jesus Christ. Jesus' blood is the new covenant. Through the blood of Jesus Christ, you have access to the forgiveness for your sins. And now, what you get to do, people are like, well, I still have to do whatever God tells me to. No, you don't have to. You get to. You get to follow God. Because God is so good, despite your sin and despite the times you screw up, he still gives you the opportunity to serve him. He still gives you the opportunity to love him. Therefore, says Moses, choose life. That's what we're doing through the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to be looking at the simplest choice. We're going to be looking at it from all kinds of angles. We're going to be comparing the law to how it stacks up with grace. But as we dive into God's word, as we study this book, it could not be any simpler than this. The Mosaic covenant offers people a decision, and the same decision exists for you today. What are you going to choose? Do you choose your own path, or do you choose to follow the God who loves you? Let's pray. Father God, I am so grateful for the fact that, God, you forgive sinners because I'm a sinner. I'm grateful for the fact that it's not dependent on me to earn your grace or your forgiveness. But God, you bestow it on us anyways. And God, with that in mind, I pray that you draw my heart closer to you daily, that you ignite in me a spirit who doesn't follow you out of compulsion or being forced to, but God, that you would ignite in me a heart that follows you because you have called me and you have named me your son. And out of love and respect and honor for that, I am compelled to be different. God, make Aviator filled with people who are compelled to be different, not because they're good, but because you are so good. God, I praise you for the book of Deuteronomy. Use it to open our eyes to understand you better. It's in your name we pray. Amen.